another video where I gush about a game as quickly as humanly possible. Welcome. This time I'll be talking about Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice. This is my favorite Souls-like game, and in the opinion of yours truly, it has better boss battles than Elden Ring. Sekiro is simply that fantastic. Let's start from the beginning though. Sekiro is similar to Souls-like games, yet makes significant changes to the base principles of a Souls-like game, but without losing sight of what makes that genre enjoyable. If you don't know what Souls or Souls-like is, I'm not sure whether to feel sorry for your loss or celebrate that you've managed to evade subjecting yourself to this genre. To summarize far too briefly though, Souls-like is a genre of action game primarily defined by its extremely difficult combat. The Souls in Souls-like refers to the game series that is the spiritual creator of the genre. I know, who could have guessed. As I was saying though, Sekiro makes changes to the Souls-like formula. Sekiro is far more defensive than any other Souls-like I've seen because of its focus on deflecting and avoiding attacks. It's actually often compared to a rhythm game because deflecting a chain of attacks has a very rhythm game-esque set of quick but specifically timed inputs. As you learn a boss fight, you of course learn the attack patterns, but you also learn the rhythm of each attack so you can deflect as many as possible. And the ringing sounds of the swords, weapons, or something clashing is not only very satisfying, it also gives you a very obvious cue for timing. While you certainly can't react to a sound that plays after you deflect an attack, it does help stick the rhythm of the attack chain in your mind. But if Sekiro were only about guarding and deflecting, it wouldn't be nearly as interesting as it is. There are certain attacks that you won't be able to deflect, so you instead either need to jump over them or dodge to avoid them. These are clearly indicated and also have their own satisfying sounds. But I'll return to specifically what deflections, jumping, and dodging all do besides just helping avoid attacks in a little bit. A variety of different attacks alongside several tools with which to avoid them makes every fight feel almost like a duel. All your attention is on learning each of the enemy's tells in order to read which attacks it will use and what you need to use in response. It really makes you feel like Sekiro. I'm joking. Sekiro's focus on avoiding attacks is what allows everything to feel like a duel more so than other Souls-like games. Even enemies that aren't bosses or mini-bosses can feel like their own miniature duels. This is because of the reasons from before, but also because unlike other Souls-likes, you can't play hyper-aggressive and kill enemies before they get the chance to attack. This can be frustrating at times as you progress through an area and die soon before a save point, and now you'll have to make your way through all those enemies again. But this frustration is mitigated by it being relatively easy to simply sprint through many sections to get to the next bonfire, mini-boss, or boss. And since Sekiro includes a sneaking mechanic, you can use this to sneak past or stealth kill many enemies without having to actually fight them. I've gotten a bit sidetracked though, so let's return to how dodging, jumping, and deflecting all work within the game's mechanics. But before I talk about that, let me talk about posture. What's this? Another mechanic. That's right, sit up straight now. Alright, so posture in Sekiro is a separate health bar of sorts that every enemy has. Posture restores itself over time, assuming you or the enemy aren't actively taking posture damage or attacking. Once the posture bar is full, the enemy will be staggered and you can deal lethal damage, either killing them or removing one of their health bars. Your posture bar works similarly, but is affected by a few other mechanics. I'll come back to that after I go more in depth about all the ways of avoiding attacks though. Dodging and jumping can be somewhat lumped into a similar category. They share an indicator, so when you see it, you know you'll need to do one of them. If you're a Souls veteran, then your instinct will be to dodge everything of course, but this is actually incredibly inefficient and often ineffective. Dodging can be used for minor optimizations in certain fights by, for example, dodging through a final hit in an attack chain to lower your recovery time. More importantly though, it's used to counter thrust attacks. While you can deflect thrust attacks, dodging into them allows you to disrupt the enemy and deal a large amount of posture damage to them. Jumping is similar because after jumping over a sweep attack, you can give them a kick to the face and deal a large amount of posture damage. The last and most common method of avoiding damage is deflecting or guarding. Both guarding and deflecting attacks deals damage to your posture, but deflections will cause less damage than guards and will prevent your posture bar from filling completely, which causes you to stagger. In addition, deflections will deal damage to the enemy's posture in return. The buildup of your own posture might make you want to back off and let your posture regenerate, but that would also mean letting your enemy's posture regenerate as well. Through this, Sekiro encourages you to play aggressively, but with an aggressive defense rather than an offense. The more an enemy attacks you and you attack them, the less their posture heals and the faster you kill them. But that also means the odds of your posture breaking increase. Luckily, the punishment for your posture breaking isn't as severe as it is for the enemy. You stagger for a moment, but unless your posture breaks in the middle of an enemy's attack chain, then you may not even be punished at all. I introduced a lot here, so to say it all simply, posture is an alternate health bar that heals over time, and your defensive options can also deal damage to that health bar. Pretty simple. That's more than enough about mechanics for now though. Now I want to impress upon you just how beautiful this world is. It's clearly and explicitly based on Japan's Sengoku or Warring States period. Sekiro will murder and brutalize you in some of the most beautiful Japanese scenery you could imagine. It makes it hard to remain angry at the game for long. You'll spend forever stuck fighting an impossible boss, then finally win and have a chance to really appreciate how beautiful your surroundings are. Gorgeous mountain views, a seemingly impregnable castle, a serene lake bed at the bottom of a canyon, a complex of Buddhist temples hugging cliff faces, a gorgeous field of reeds swaying in the wind, and an odd lake filled and surrounded by ruined buildings. There's so much beauty in Sekiro that you often get pulled out of the brutal combat to simply soak in exactly where you are. With each new area, there's a completely different feel and beauty. As you sneak through the ruins surrounding the quiet lake, you find strange abominations playing an eerie tune. They feel almost human, but look nothing like one. As you progress, you learn they are obsessed with pursuing youth and live to steal it from others. Maybe this means nothing to you, but if you fight and die to one, you quickly realize how terrifying and difficult these enemies are if you aren't careful to fight them alone. A tension and fear settles in as you come across an area filled with these enemies. Running at them isn't an option, so you have to use stealth to worm your way through them, taking them out with sneak attacks. The tension from the difficulty and the feeling elicited by the story of the area are both in sync and make this area one that you aren't likely to forget. Perfectly crafted areas like these are how Sekiro fills the space between boss fights and makes the entirety of the game feel so intensely satisfying. Of course, not every area is quite like my example, but each has its own feeling and experience. I got a little off topic, so let's refocus ourselves on the boss fights you'll be spending a significant portion of the game fighting and dying to. Each boss is unique, and each has its own weakness. You have a wide array of tools at your fingertips that all can be used to counter specific bosses or mini-bosses, and if you can figure out which to use against who, then mini-bosses can be made significantly easier. A more niche weakness that many players might not know is that the headless ape is actually weak to the spear. After knocking the ape down, you can use the spear to thrust into his gaping neck wound and pull out the creature controlling his corpse, dealing massive posture damage. Human bosses usually don't have intense weaknesses, but they also typically have more attacks you can punish if you have the skill to do so. Weaknesses aside though, each boss feels massively different to fight. Even between human bosses, the experience is massively different. Genichiro, Butterfly, and Owl are all human bosses. Genichiro is quick and brutal. He fights you with an intensity but likes to pull back sometimes and take advantage of his bow. Butterfly fights with an absurd dexterity and makes use of a combination of aerial attacks and illusions. Owl fights cleverly, using many underhanded tactics and tries to engage you on his terms. All the boss fights are fine-tuned to both reflect their character and feel difficult, but it always feels like if you could just figure them out and were able to punish their attacks a little bit better, then you could wipe the floor with them. I will admit though that there is one boss that feels a little out of place in Sekiro, the Demon of Hatred. He has an interesting build-up if you're paying attention to what certain characters say, but even if you weren't, when you see him you can immediately tell there is more here than meets the eye. He's missing an entire arm after all. While his build-up and design are exceptional, the Demon of Hatred is just a normal Souls boss put into Sekiro. And Sekiro is a very different game. Fighting him feels like a marathon because the translation of a Souls boss into Sekiro is a little awkward and his posture builds up very slowly due to his lack of attacks you can meaningfully punish. This means that you'll likely fill up his posture bar around the same time you'll have finished off his normal health bar. He also has a few weaknesses you can exploit though. Malcontent, a whistle tool, can stun him up to 3 times. The Phoenix Umbrella tool can mitigate his fire attacks, and Divine Confetti can increase your damage by a little bit. Fortunately, the fight is optional though, so you don't have to fight him if you don't want to. For those of you who've played Elden Ring and fought the infamous Malenia, Malenia is basically a Sekiro boss put into Elden Ring, just like how the Demon of Hatred is a Souls boss in Sekiro. The translation is done better though. The long attack chain of Malenia's waterfowl dance is very reminiscent of Sekiro. Dodging that attack also requires a Sekiro-esque set of unique actions. If you enjoyed that fight, then I guarantee you will enjoy Sekiro. If you hated it, then don't be too quick to cast judgment on Sekiro. Sekiro sets you up to fight bosses like Malenia, and focuses primarily on using all of your tools to avoid long attack chains like hers. Meanwhile, Elden Ring encourages a more aggressive playstyle that is partially subverted when you fight Malenia. I've talked enough about bosses now though. It's impossible to fully convey how polished Sekiro's bosses are until you fight them, but I hope I've at least given you some idea. It's difficult to talk about the story in a Souls-like game, but Sekiro does have a more clear story than most games in that genre. Typically, games in the genre use the environment, item descriptions, and small snippets of dialogue to convey their story. Sekiro takes a similar perspective, but there is quite a bit more dialogue than in most other Soul-likes. You can learn a lot about the main characters and what they've gone through while you progress through the primary events of the main story. If you're paying attention, you can start to get a full picture of how all these characters are connected through their pasts. The primary story itself isn't anything that will blow you away, just gathering a few items to remove what is essentially a curse. But the real weight of the story is getting you to care about all of its characters. Kuro is your lord and the focal point of most of the story events. His blood allows others to gain immortality and has become deeply coveted by nearly all the characters that have learned about it. Curing this curse of sorts is the primary pursuit of the story, but Kuro is a child. He's a very mature child, but still a child. He's weak and knows he can't fight on his own. There are moments where you can tell it pains him to rely on you time and time again, but he's level-headed and knows what needs to be done. He's a character that clearly cares about others and wants what's best for his people. A character that you can begin to feel is worth serving and protecting as you get to know him better. The characters are just well written. Perhaps you're one of those heathen cutscene and dialogue skippers though. Obviously you won't get much of the story if that's you, but the different environments reflect parts of the story, giving you some of the story even if you aren't that interested. I've already painted a picture for you once of how the environment creates tension and tandem with difficulty, so I won't do it again. But let's take a quick look at Ashina Castle, the focal point for many of the story's events. The first time you arrive here, you might hear some small details if you eavesdrop on anyone, but nothing too important. The second time around, you'll notice that things have clearly changed though. There are now two distinct factions within the castle. One seems to have sent spies and elite enemies into the castle, but a full-scale battle hasn't taken place yet. The stage is set though. And the third time you return to the castle, you find much of it aflame. Enemies of both factions are actively in conflicts when you run into them, and several buildings are on fire. Even ignoring the dialogue, it's obvious something important has happened. Sekiro does an incredible job making its environments part of the story. You can't help but notice the weight of events occurring around you. I will again echo my earlier statement that the main story may not be exceptionally impressive on its own, but its delivery and the display of the consequences certainly are. I've droned on for more than long enough though. If you decide to play through the game or even replay it, I hope you enjoy it even as the difficulty makes you suffer. And if you'd like to see more about the game or just want to hear more of my lovely voice, I'll be streaming Sekiro on Twitch when this video goes live, so do check it out. Thanks for watching though, subscribe if you'd like, but most importantly, fare thee well.